So we're going to do the table of values, right? So remind me, what did you guys plug in? What did I say to plug in? Do me a favor though. Remember that x is the input. So just above that, put in for input and y is your output. What's the word that tells us all the possible inputs? How about domain? You guys remember that? All the possible x values, and then what do we call the y values? Range, right? So just keep that in mind. So I think we did -2. We did -1, 0, 1, and 2, right? So to do this by hand, I'm going to say f of, and as I was walking around, I really liked that I saw this, f of -2. So that means we're going to do this. 2/3 in parentheses raised to the -2. What was the thing that we talked about yesterday with the exponents? How do I take that negative exponent and make it positive? We toss it to the other side of the fraction. But when you have a fraction, if I toss this to the bottom, that means I'm dividing by 2/3. When we divide by a fraction, what do we really do? Multiply by the reciprocal. So to make this positive, you're just going to say 3/2 squared. So I flip the fraction and I change the power to a positive one. Okay? Now when I do that, that's the same as 3 squared over 2 squared. What's 3 squared? 9. What's 4 squared? Or said the answer. What's 2 squared? 4. Okay? So the fraction for this thing is 9/4. Some of you guys plugged it in your calculator. What is 9/4 as a decimal? What'd you guys get? 2.25, right? How many of you guys got 2.25? Okay, do me a favor, make sure you write down the 9/4. Hint, hint, hint. I may want you to write it out this way. Now, how could I double check that on the calculator? How do I know that 2.25 is the same as 9/4? How can I do that? I could take 9 and divide it by 4. So real quick on your calculator, take 9 and divide it by 4. I'll do it with you guys and you'll see. Whoops. I do that. That's a bad habit. I set my little pen on the thing there. So 9 divided by 4 is 2.25. That's how you double check your math. All right, so now the next one is going to be f of -1. So that's going to be 2/3 raised to the -1, right? And so that's just going to be 2/3. Oh, no, wait. It's negative. I got to make that negative positive. How do I do that? I've got to flip it. So it's 3/2 raised to the first power, which is just 3/2. We had a funny conversation about that. Somebody earlier said, or yesterday said, the negative just became positive and then it just went away. Well, remember, that's not what happened. Here we flipped it, and it becomes a positive first power. Anything raised to the first power is itself. So that's 3/2. What'd you guys get if you did it on the calculator? 1.5. So if here's what you do. If you put it in your table of values and you get 1.5, and then Mr. Adams is a meanie and makes you calculate it by hand, because this is an algebra class, not a calculator class, and I want you to double check your answer, which is 3/2, you could just plug it in and it'll say 1.5. Right? Okay. Let's do the next one. Anybody want to tell me what the answer is? F of 0? 2/3 raised to the 0. Anything raised to the 0 is what, guys? 1. F of 1 is 2/3 to the first power, which is just what? 2/3. So you probably got 0.6 repeating, right? You double check that in your calculator. Take 2 divided by 3, and you get 0.6 repeating. It might truncate it to 0.667 or whatever, depending on your calculator. I'm just going to write down 2/3. And then f of 2 is 2/3 squared, which is the same as 2 squared over 3 squared, because you're distributing that 2 through, which is going to be 4 over 9, 4/9. And that would be 0.4 repeating, right? Is that what you got on your calculator? 0.444?
Yeah.
So that's 0.4 repeating. All right, cool. So I'm going to pause the video for a second. I'm going to do it and see, let's do the graph and see if you guys, if your graph looks like mine. I'm going to give you some pointers on how to do it a little easier if you're struggling with graphing with fractions. So this is my graph, right? And probably, I think just about everybody has it in their graph. So, what the heck? So remember a couple of things. One, when we go to enter in, we got to tell the calculator that it's a fraction. The calculator doesn't know 2 divided by 3 is a fraction. And it doesn't know that we're raising the whole fraction to x. If you do this, if you say 2 divided by 3 raised to the x, your calculator thinks that it's 2 divided by 3 to the x. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we put our fraction in parentheses, because this means the calculator looks at it and goes, what am I raising to the x? Oh, the stuff in parentheses. What's in the parentheses? 2/3. The calculator doesn't know. So we got to tell it. And then we could double check our work by going to the table of values, right? So I'm just going to jot that down real quick to make sure. And we talked about this, but I didn't really copy that yet. So let's put that in our notes. You don't have to write it down a second time if you have it written down. I just want to show you how you double check it on your calculator. So I'm going to do this file. Okay. And so one of the things I like to do with graphs, these fractions will line up, right? But it's kind of hard. What's 9/4? Well, it's 2.25. I mean, you could do it, right? I could come in here and I could say 2. Remember, this is -2, 9/4. And we know that 9/4 is 2.25, right? So I could go over -2 and then go up 2 and go about 1/4 of the way. I hate that that does that. I wish that it didn't do that. Okay, so that's the point. -2, well, I can't write that over there. I got to remember to write it over here. -2, 9/4. Then the next one is -1, 1.5. That's going to be about right there. -1, 1.5. Or 3/2. The next one is 0, 1, so I'm going to put a dot here. So that's going to be 0, 1. Almost made a mistake there. The next one is 1 and 2/3, right? That's about right here. I hate this. Okay? So that's the point 1 comma 2/3. And when we get to 2, it's a little bit less than half. Okay? Now what I like to do is, we know that it's never going to cross 0, but I want to find a value that's pretty darn close. So if I go to 10, it's almost nothing, right? If I go to 17, it's almost nothing. So I know to the right, it's going to be almost nothing. So I want to just look at a couple of other things to graph, because I want to go all the way to the end. So at 4, it's almost 5. So when x is -4, it's almost 5. So I'm going to go to -4, and it's just a tad above 5. Okay? And then I'm going to look at my graph again, because I'm trying to figure out how to make that other side. Now, some of you guys sketched it pretty well. 5 is 7.5. So, and I got another one. If I go over 5, then I'm going to come up about 7.5. So my curve, which is very difficult for me to draw, is going to go something like this. I'm going to come down as best I can and come through all these points. Right? So I was a little critical. Now, what do you notice about this graph? If you read it like a book and you go left to right, what does it do? What does the y value do? Well, you may not realize this, but from here to here, to get from this number to this number, you're still multiplying by 2/3. To get from this number to this number, you're still multiplying by 2/3. To get from this number to this number, you're still multiplying by 2/3. And to get from this one, you're still multiplying by 2/3. But what do you notice about these numbers as we multiply by 2/3? They are getting smaller. So this is a decay. So what's our b term? Well, b is equal to 2/3. So a decay occurs when b is between 0 and 1, right? Do you guys remember that from yesterday? All right.